my channel. Welcome back to another video. I'm Jessie and you're watching Welcome to my very late June wrap up. Messy Jessie is here in house and we have our reading journal out. We're gonna give you the stats. We're gonna give you the statistic tea on our Pride Month read. So during the month of June, which is known as LGBTQ Pride Month, as well as Indigenous Awareness Month, as well as Caribbean Heritage Month, my reading statistics are as followed. In the month of June, I read a total of 13 books with a page count totaling 4,346. My average rating was 4.7 stars. 9 of the books I read physically, 9 of them were books that I owned, 5 of them were audiobooks, 6 of them were anticipated releases, 1 of them was historical fiction, 2 was magical realism, 1 of them was fantasy, 2 were nonfiction, and 7 of them were contemporaries. Overall, I think that June was a spectacular reading month. Always, I think almost every single year, every time I've done my stats throughout the course of me reading for BookTube, June and February have consistently been my favorite reading months, and I'm guessing that that has something to do with the fact that the Blackathon is in February and Queer Celebratory Month is June. So it stands to reason why my reading satisfaction goes up in those months, and this year was absolutely no different. I read some new favorites. Some of these books are incredibly slept on, and I'm just really excited to talk about all of them, both the highly anticipated and the books that BookTube is sleeping on. So without further ado, let us hop right into it. Oh, I will say one quick thing. After I did these stats, I realized that there was a 14th book that I read, which I will just start this video off with that book. So these stats are somewhat skewed by the fact that that book was not included in the numbers that I just read to you. The book that I am referencing is none other than Finley. Donovan is killing it. This was my June buddy read with my bestie Jan of Jan Agaton. I will leave her channel link down below. If you have not seen any of my shenanigans between myself and Jan, I don't know where you've been, but Jan is pretty much all over my Instagram. By the time that you will have seen this video, Jan and I will have met in person, because as of right now, as of me filming this right now, she is traveling on her way to see us, and we are so freaking excited to spend time in the flesh with her. So this was our first buddy read that we ever did, I believe, and it was hilarious. Finley Donovan is a very comedic mystery following a struggling woman who is reeling after her recent divorce, where her husband, who is trash, cheated on her and left her for a younger woman. And she is desperate for money after he reveals his intention to apply for full custody. And because he is very financially, economically privileged, he is absolutely sure to get it. And when a woman mistakenly overhears a conversation between Finley and her boss, she thinks that Finley is a hitman for hire, and she hires Finley to kill her husband. And at first Finley is like, I'm not doing that. I'm not a hitman. I'm not busting a cap in nobody's ass. Eventually she's like, funk it, let's do it. And the book is about her killing this man and the incredibly riotous repercussions of that action. It was really funny. I very much enjoyed this book. It was one of those books that was hard to put down. I didn't know if I would enjoy it the same way that everybody else did, because y'all know I have a rough relationship with hyped reads, but this book did not disappoint me. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It is going to be a series, and I very much cannot wait. The only reason I gave it 4 out of 5 stars is because it actually lost me a bit at the end. The story just kind of lost its magic. I don't know what it was. I still can't pinpoint it. The first 75% of the novel was so strong, and then it was almost as if it just got old. The next book I'm going to be talking about is a debut book, one of my anticipated releases that was so kindly sent to me by Penguin Teen, and that is none other than the Passing Playbook. This is a really incredible story about 2 boys, one who is Black and trans and the other who is white and cisgender, and it's about them falling in love on a soccer team that they both are a part of, but the Black trans boy is in the closet, and if he wants to play on this team, he has to come out of the closet and deal with everything that comes with being a out trans athlete. There is so much that I can say about this book. I loved that it discussed the nuances of being a trans athlete, and this book did such a beautiful job of balancing the queer struggles with the queer joy. I felt like it was far more lighthearted than it was heavy, and I very much appreciated that. I appreciated that we were able to talk about some complex issues, some issues that really hurt and affect trans kids, especially BIPOC trans kids, without it being traumatic, or rather trauma porn. I really loved the relationship that our protagonist has with his family. I loved the slow burn romance. It was really great to get a feel-good romance that I could actually root for. The writing was straightforward. I definitely laughed out loud at sometimes. The dialogue did not feel cheesy. There were lines that really just hit me hard in the chest, like this one. Even though he wished he were bigger, he knew that one day he'd miss being too big for his dad to carry and put to bed. Just these little heartwarming and touching lines, and I just really loved so much about this book. I loved the representation of being trans. I loved the representation of feeling like an outsider, of just not knowing where your place is in the world, or knowing it but not knowing how to get to that place because the world is so unwelcoming at times. This was on track to be a 5 out of 5 star read, until the introduction of a trope that I absolutely cannot stand. It is a trope that I ended up making an entire video about. The video talks about my issues with how closeted characters are depicted in modern queer literature, and also historic queer literature. So I'll leave that link down below. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that trope here because I do have an entire video about it, and I would love it if you watched it. But essentially, it has this trope that I cannot stand. It is my least favorite trope in regards to queer literature. And that is where the closeted character is villainized for wanting to stay in the closet. It was handled so poorly in this book. The way that this character is treated and regarded and seen as not brave for staying in the closet, it drove me absolutely insane, and it drove my rating down from a 5 star to a 3. So if you do read this book, do be mindful that closeted characters are not portrayed in the nuanced way that I think that they should be. I'm still really excited to read more from this author, but that was one theme that I would like to see disappear from his future books. Then, in celebration of Caribbean Heritage Month, I read Rainbow Milk by Paul Mendez. Yo, we don't know where the cover jacket is. We have no idea where the cover jacket is, but the cover is absolutely beautiful. This is a book where we're following a young British Caribbean 19-year-old boy named Jesse, and Jesse is gay. He is a Jehovah's Witness, and when he is found to be queer, he is excommunicated from his church. I'm not sure if I use proper terminology, but he's kicked out of the church. He's kicked out of his home, and he is sent away from everything he's ever known. And he ends up moving to the big city and becoming a sex worker. And it is about his life after he is kicked out of his home and displaced. This was such a hard-hitting book for me, and I think it's going to be a hard-hitting book for a lot of people. I just want to wrap up Jesse in my arms and protect him. I loved him as a character. I loved how real he was, and I loved how unapologetic this book, without any frills at all, it wrote about what it's like to be queer and homeless, to be Black and queer, to be a Black queer male. The intricacies of existing at the intersections of all of those identities was handled with the utmost care and attention. It just was a really beautiful story. It also is intergenerational, and none of the characters are flat. Even his parents are given complexities. Even the villainous characters in this book are given nuance, and I always have mad respect for that, mad props for that. I am gonna warn my non-Western reader friends, my non-Caribbean friends, though my friends who don't speak patois, that this book does have a lot of patois in it and slang. And so if you decide to read this book, there is very likely going to be conversations that you simply don't understand because you don't know the vernacular, and that is okay. But it is not okay. Judge the book for having language in it that isn't standard English. You know what I'm saying? Let's not be that person. So just be very mindful about that when you read and potentially review this book. It is definitely a new favorite. I can't wait to read more from Paul Mendez. So many trigger warnings. I do not even know where to begin with the trigger warning, so be mindful of that as well. Next up is You Brought Me the Ocean. This is a graphic novel that I very much enjoyed. It tells the story of a young boy named Jake and his love interest, whose name is Kenny. So this is Jake and this is Kenny. And Jake finds, he's born with these weird markings all up and down his arms. And his mom is like, yeah, those are nothing to worry about. You were just born. It's fine. Don't investigate it. He finds out that these markings allow him to control water, and he begins to play with his water abilities. And meanwhile, he meets and falls in love with a swimmer whose name is Kenny, and they have this whirlwind romance. And the two of them are living in this small desert town, and they are being targeted by homophobic bullies. And so it's about these two boys falling in love, having a romance, and learning how to be together. It is set within the DC universe, and I personally appreciated the touches to the DC universe. I'm not a fan of DC comics, but this comic did make it very easy to understand what was going on. It wasn't super reference heavy, but I did understand the references that were made. There are some cameos. I think this is going to be a really good book for water signs. I thought that the art was beautiful. I'm sure it would turn off a lot of people because it's not your typical graphic novel art. At least it's not the kind of graphic novel art that is popular on BookTube. Definitely check out the art style before you commit to this. Again, I ended up rating this book down. I think I gave it a 3-star. Let me check. Yep, I gave it 3 stars because, again, we have really problematic depiction of closeted characters, but this is a little different. Jake's best friend Maria is in love with him, and that you find out that very early on in the book. It is not a spoiler, but she punishes Jake and makes him apologize for not coming out to her. She's his best friend, so he should have come out to her.
No, sweetie.
Just because you are somebody's best friend doesn't mean that you are privileged or entitled to certain private information. If Jake doesn't want to come out to you, period. That's the end of that sentence. He doesn't have to come out to you if he doesn't want to. You being his best friend does not obligate him to tell you something that he's not ready to tell. And good thing he didn't tell you, because look how you're reacting. That was the first thing that pissed me off. And the second thing was she was then like, well, if you had told me that you were gay, then I wouldn't have fallen in love with you, and it's your fault for leading me on. And I guess I wouldn't have been so upset that that happened if it had been addressed in the book and depicted as wrong. But nope, Jake apologizes. Her behavior is seen as totally acceptable, and it is completely glossed over. And I was like, what universe am I in that this is acceptable? I gave it 3 stars. That idea is just so harmful. Can authors please learn how to write and handle closeted characters?
Speaking of closeted characters,
another book that has this trope. See, because I kept reading all of these queer books with this trope, that was why I ended up making that video. So please watch it. I am way more eloquent about my issues with this trope and why it is so horribly wrong in that video that I'm going to be in this one. So the next book, oddly enough, it is one of my new favorites. I also have a dedicated reading vlog for it that I will also leave linked down below. But this book is Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. This is a chunky, thick queer classic. It is about 500 pages. It's 440 pages. And it tells the story of Nan King, who is a young girl who sees this gorgeous woman performing at a music hall, and she falls in love with her and becomes her professional dresser. And so this woman, whose name is Kitty, takes her with her to London. They move from the small English city that they are in at the time and go to London, and slowly Nan is falling more and more and more in love with Kitty, and she doesn't know if Kitty feels the same way. The book is about what happens when this girl who's in love with this other girl who may or may not be queer during this era of time where it was expressly unacceptable to be queer go away together. This book took so many turns that I was not expecting. I was not expecting the sex worker representation. I was not expecting it to get so steamy. So steamy. 3rd degree burn, 4th degree burns. I'm still in recovery. I'm still on pain medication. This book was so naughty. Every time I say that a book is naughty, there's inevitably somebody in the comment section who's gonna be like,
it's really not that smutty, Jessie.
Look, I don't read a lot of romance, okay? Y'all gotta be gentle with me. You know that I'm ace. They were so steamy that I couldn't read this book in public. I'd be reading the book like, it was really intense. The writing was absolutely gorgeous. I have no qualms about the writing. I thought it was simply beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. Sarah Waters is now an auto-buy author for me. She is an author that I'm dying to read. One of you amazing subscribers just sent me, I think it was Fingersmith, another one of her books. Now I'm thinking about the title of that book being Fingersmith, and I'm almost certain that that's Fingersmith. Okay, Jan. I found out that Tipping the Velvet, you find when you're reading the book, has a very non-innocent connotation. Wait till you read this book. Oysters will never be the same again. The term velvet will never be the same. The term tipping will never be. It's just nothing about your life will ever be the same after reading Tipping the Velvet. It is worth the time and effort and energy to put into this book. And this edition, I think this is the 2018 edition. After the year 2018, which I think was the 20th anniversary of this book, Sarah Waters added an afterword to the book where she talks about some of the things that she wrote and how they were problematic. And I just loved that she had the self-awareness to be like, yo, this book is dated in some ways, and here's a list of how and why it is dated. Also, she talks about the ways that one of the closeted characters is treated and how that character is villainized and punished. So I loved that she grew over time and had the self-awareness to critique her own work. Still really recommend this book. I do recommend being aware of that criticism, reading that afterward though. Next up, we have another one of my favorite reads of all time. This is definitely going to make my top 10 books of 2021 list, period. Like there's no way that this book doesn't end up on that list, and that book is none other than Punch Me Up to the Gods. This was one of my most highly anticipated releases, and I mean high on that list of books that I was dying to read. It couldn't possibly have been any higher, and it did not disappoint me. And when I say high, I mean my expectations were through the roof, and this not only met but exceeded my expectations. So Punch Me Up to the Gods is a memoir from a Black queer man about his life growing up in a very homophobic household, growing up in a poor household, struggling to find community amongst other Black boys when there was so much homophobia and self-hate and isolation that he experienced from other Black boys. The thesis of this book is based off of Gwendolyn Brooks's We Real Cool, and every section of the book starts with a line from that poem. That poem means so much to me. If you haven't read the poem, no big deal, because it is in the books. Almost every single page I had to annotate. The most beautiful, poignant lines. I cried while reading this book. I cried without tears. My body wept. Wept for this man, for the boy that he was, for just everything. I was not expecting to identify so much with his character. And it also is just such a beautiful, deep, cutting exploration of toxic masculinity, and especially of how that impacts and affects Black boys. Throughout the book, he's also writing this letter to this little Black boy he sees on a bus, and he's watching this boy's father slowly condition him to be a man at age 3. Throughout this book, you are watching Brian himself as a child go through this awful conditioning. And then as an adult, while he's writing this book, he's watching that cycle continue with this stranger boy that he sees on a bus. And I beg you to read this book. I cannot beg you enough to read this book. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your background is. Like, I'm begging you to read Punch Me Up to the Gods. Trigger warnings though. Trigger warnings for drug use, homophobia, queer slurs, physical violence. It's just all kinds of trigger warnings. It is a very heavy book, and it was exactly the book that I needed in my life. Then I read Tokyo Ever After. I think I lied. I think this was the first book that I buddy read with Jan. Yes, it was definitely Tokyo Ever After. This was another one of my anticipated releases. It didn't disappoint. 5 out of 5 stars. I don't think I said it, but I didn't think I needed to say it. This was 5 out of 5 stars too. But Tokyo Ever After is a story about a young girl named Izumi. Izumi is just perusing the internet with her friends one day and discovers that her dad is royalty, and she's actually Princess Izumi, and she flies to Japan for the summer, and she is trying to adjust to royal life. It isn't just this,
oh, I found out I'm a princess and I'm enjoying the glitz and the glamour.
She really is working hard to learn the Japanese language, to learn the customs, to not embarrass this family, to not overstep, to learn what it means to be royalty and the responsibilities it comes with, and how to do that ethically, and the politics of this family and all of that. And that's what I loved about this book. It wasn't just this romanticization of royal life. It was, okay, I just found out that I'm royalty. What do I do to make sure that I don't disappoint my people? I really, really respected the way that that was written. And I loved Izumi as a character. She was so sarcastic and immature in the best ways, and loving and emotional and just so real. The dialogue she and her friends had was hilarious. I loved the relationship between her and her friends. They are ride or dies. And it just, I don't know, it really, really, this book has this extra special place in my heart too, because it's the book that Jan and I bonded over, and I'm obsessed with Jan. I love you so much. So this is the book that started it all. And I also really, really dug the romance in this book. There's that bodyguard romance. I didn't know I had a thing for the bodyguard trope. The romance in this book was so cute. Akio is a little cinnamon roll. He is a ooey gooey gooey, and I just really loved him. They were writing these awful haiku poems though. I wish that we hadn't been subjected to read these awful haikus between these two cheesy motherfunkers who just needed to get it on and get it over with. I still love the book, still gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and it is going to be a series. I am so excited. I cannot wait for the next one. Then for Queer Blackathon, I read You Should See Me in a Crown. This is an amazing, incredible freaking story about a girl named Liz who struggles with general anxiety disorder, and she doesn't like the spotlight. It makes her skin crawl. She gets somatic symptoms with her anxiety, and she will throw up. She just physically cannot stand having eyes on her or attention or any negativity that comes her way. However, she's also struggling financially, and she wants to go to the college of her dreams, but she doesn't get enough scholarship money in order to go. She's short $10,000, and lo and behold, the town that she lives in is obsessed with prom. The winners of prom get $10,000. And so despite all of her reservations, she decides to enter the competition, go to prom, and she falls in love with her competition, who is a girl named Mac. Part of the reason that I loved this book was because Mac gave me Stargirl vibes. Comment down below if you read Stargirl. Stargirl is literally Mac. Okay, but then we have to talk about Liz herself and the wonderful girl that she was, and how powerful and strong and brave and courageous, just all of the things. I really, really loved her. I loved that, you know, she wants to be a doctor despite the fact that she's terrified of blood. Just these little things about her. The opposite of a one-dimensional character. She is complex. She has so many interests. She wants to be a musician. She's fantastic. I love the relationship that she has with her family unit. I thought that was really well done. The anxiety rep and the representation of what it is like to live with somatic symptoms was also flawlessly executed. There's just so much that I can say for this book. I don't have any criticisms. Next up, we have 30 Names of Night. This is going to be a non-binary book club pick towards the end of the year. I loved it so much that I already want to just pressure you to read it. Click add to cart right freaking now. This book, again, another one of my all-time favorites. Would be shocked if it doesn't make my top 10 of 2021 list, because it was that freaking good. I knew I was going to love this book, but I was not prepared to be obsessed with it. This is a book by a queer non-binary Syrian author that tells the story of a trans boy whose mother is killed in a fire. He is a painter, but ever since his mother's ghost has begun to visit him, he's been completely unable to paint. It also is intertwined with his family histories. His grandmother plays a huge role in this book, and it is about the Syrian American community or communities. It is about the magic of Syrian individuals. It is about queer histories, queer and trans histories that run within families. It is about blood and sweat and the struggles of immigration. And it is just beautiful. This is some of the most poetic, just transcendental and mesmerizing writing I've ever read in my life. I want to read every single thing that Zain Jukadar writes for the rest of my life, from now until the absolute end of time. It was just nothing short of immaculate. If you like magical realism, you have to read this. You're an air sign. If you like birds, because birds play a big role in this book, you definitely have to read this. There is demi rep. There is amazing trans non-binary rep. It's just amazing. It's a great family story. It's a great sibling story. I loved this book and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Now I want to talk about a few of the audiobooks that I read in the month of June.
I read so many books.
The first audiobook I'm going to talk about is Blackwater Sister. This is a book that I wasn't expecting to read, but it popped up on Scribd, and I was, doing my walks with Akasha, and I was like, you know what, let's start an audiobook, and this is the one that I chose. And the details of this are a little foggy because I read it like way at the start of the month. I think it was actually the first book that I read. I remember less about the geared synopsis and more just about the meat of the book. We're following a young Asian woman who is closeted from her family and she's terrified to come out to them. She has a girlfriend who currently lives overseas and they are planning on moving in together, but currently she had to move back in with family in order to help them overcome a financial hardship that they're experiencing. Her father is recovering from cancer and it's just a really hard time for the family overall. So all of those things are reasons why she's not yet ready to come out to her parents. But in addition to that, she really does feel that if she comes out to her family, she's going to lose everything, and she's not ready to lose her family. The mere idea or possibility of that is just nothing short of unacceptable to her. And so she's terrified of coming out and doesn't want to, although it creates a lot of strife and struggle between her and her girlfriend. Her grandmother begins to haunt her, and her grandmother is using her to finish some unfinished business. And in addition to that, there is this god called the Blackwater Sister who is stalking her and being creepy as shit. This god scared the pants off of me. This god was terrifying, so terrifying. It was powerful and forceful, and there's so much mythos and spirituality that definitely needs to be respected when reading and reviewing this book, and I thought those elements were so beautiful. I, of course, can't speak to their execution, not being a part of that community myself, but I definitely did enjoy it. Again, this is a book that depicted closeted characters very poorly, and I talked about that in the closeted characters video. Not these reads just being problematic AF, but other than that, I think I ended up giving Blackwater Sister 4.5 out of 5 stars. I still would read more from this author. I thought the book was phenomenal, beautiful, gorgeous. The spirituality representation, the representation of gods and spirits, it just was so freaking good. I really, really loved it. I also read this short little audiobook called Earth Eater. This was another book that wasn't on my TBR, but it popped up on Scribd and I just had to read it, and it did not disappoint me. It was so freaking good. It is a magical realism Latinx story about, I want to say it's Argentinian. I cannot remember specifically the country that this family hails from, that their heritage comes from, but it is following this young girl who is a definite earth sign. She's grieving the loss of her madre, and she begins to eat dirt. And when she eats dirt, she experiences visions and knowledge that she wouldn't have without the consumption of dirt. And it helps her know where missing people are. I don't know what's going on with my dog. This is one of the books that's best to say very little about because, like I said, it is short and it packs a punch. If you like creepy, spiritual, magical, realistic,
weird books,
this is definitely the book for you. It is a new favorite for me. There's nothing about this book that I didn't like. I highly recommend. I need to get my hands on a physical copy so that I can reread it physically. It definitely gave me Follow Me to Ground vibes. Just so absolutely wonderful. 5 out of 5 stars. Another queer audiobook that I read this month, in the month of June, was Milkfed. This is another book that was so naughty. I was walking my dog while listening to this book on audio, and there were multiple points during this walk that I had to turn the audio down because I was paranoid that the people on the street who didn't even exist because I was on the street alone would hear what the narrator was saying. So raunchy, so beautiful, so amazing. In this book, we are following a young Jewish woman who lives with disordered eating, and she is crushing hard on this fat Jewish woman who works at a yogurt shop that she likes to go to. This book also completely changed the way that I look at yogurt. I I can never eat yogurt in public ever again after reading this book. I'm telling you, if you want something that is naughty and raunchy, you have to read Milkfed. It's also kinky. And it just gave me all of the blush, okay? I really loved how fat positive it was, how body positive it was, how sex positive. I loved how heavily Jewish culture and identity was explored. I loved the main characters being messy. I loved the representation of disordered eating. There was so much about this book that I adored. It is another new favorite. Again, 5 out of 5 stars. Cannot recommend it enough. I really cannot recommend it enough, but definitely look up some reviews from Own Voices reviewers because that is what is most important. One more audiobook to talk about before I wrap up this video by discussing the last book in this video, which is my new favorite book of all time. So before we get into that, I'm going to talk about Jin City. Jin City is a book that is going to be featured in my Books That BookTube is Sleeping On video, so I'm not going to talk about it too much in this video. A couple of these books are going to make it into that series. It is a South Asian fantasy. I believe it is an Indian fantasy, and we are following a young, very poor boy named Indulbed who lives in a crumbling mansion because his father has slowly descended into alcoholism and mental illness and has let the mansion fall into disrepair. And he comes home one day and his father is in this coma that he later finds out is magically induced. And he ends up being kidnapped and sent to this
pit under the world
with these giant people-eating worms. They're horrific. And he's trapped underneath the earth with this legless Jin who is insane. It is about him trying to escape this pit. It follows him over a very long period of time. When I tell you that this book had me gripped, it is one of my new favorite audiobooks of all time. If you like gods as characters, definitely have to read this book. I learned so much about Indian mythology and about Jin, and this is one of the most amazing sci-fi fantasy books I've ever read in my life. The science was amazing. Genetics was a really heavy component of the book. I definitely nerded out so hard over it. Jin City is the bee's knees, and if any of that sounded remotely interesting, I'm gonna need you to just add the book to cart. Please add the book to cart because the author has been hinting at continuing with the series for a while, but I'm guessing that because interest in it is low, he's just not inspired to do so. So I think if a bunch of you just buy this book and actually read it and rave about it, maybe that's what we will need in order to get the sequel, because I'm like, do it for me. I want it so bad. The final book that I'm going to be talking about in this video, which is my new favorite book of all time. Comment down below if you know what this book is going to be. If you have been following me on Instagram
literally at all,
you will already know this book. It is our July book club pick for the non-binary book club, and the live show on it is in 2 days. And that book is none other than Dear Sentran by Akwaeke Emezi. I don't know why I bother to say that Akwaeke Emezi is my favorite author, because y'all know, if you've clicked on one of my videos, you know that Akwaeke Emezi is my favorite author. You know that I'm obsessed with them. You know that they are the actual knees on every actual bee. I absolutely love Akwaeke Emezi and I would die for them. And this book is their memoir. I wanted a memoir from them since the moment that I read Freshwater, and I've never finished an author's book and gone, man, I really want to read their memoir. And so when they announced that they were coming out with one, I almost died right there. I almost dug my own grave. I would have tied my bow tie for the last time. You know what I'm saying? It changed my life. It changed my life, and you're going to see me talk about it so much. So without getting too emotional, I'm just going to say that this book saved my life. That's as much as I can say. When I read Freshwater, I'm only now slowly beginning to open up about this because it's very private and I'm still not ready to talk about it completely. But when I read Freshwater, it was the most seen I'd ever felt in my life. And this book did something for me that even Freshwater could not. It gave me the courage to be all of myself. And for those of you who don't know, I recently started using we pronouns in addition to the they pronouns that I use. And I think eventually it would be really great for me to only use we pronouns. That is actually what we feel the most comfortable with. But I'm just not there yet for so many reasons. And all of those reasons have to do with the world being the world that we live in. I'm trying to figure out how to say this without exposing myself too much, because I still, like I said, am still not quite ready to talk about why I relate so much to this book. This is a memoir that is told in like a series of letters that Akweke is writing to the people in their life. The writing is dark and violent and visceral, and they write about so much. They write about their experience being a god in this world, but also about how they fight suicidality every day. And there are so many people who like to judge Akweke and call them a liar and treat them as if they don't have feelings. I find that very disturbing, considering how much in this book Akweke talks about struggling with suicide every single day. People often critique them for having so much hubris and being braggadocious and having so much pride and vanity of self, conveniently ignoring all of the vulnerability that they show in this book. And I just find it so disrespectful. By the time that this video goes live, the live show on this book will be conducted, and I will leave that linked down below if you want to check it out, if you want to hear more about not just my thoughts with this book, but Jan's thoughts as well, because she's going to be on the live show with me, and I'm really excited. What a wrap up, y'all. I've been filming for an hour and I'm sweaty and I'm tired and I want to be done. So that is going to do it for this video. I really hope that y'all found some books that you are interested in. Please let me know if you've read any of these books. Do you have any similar opinions? Do you have any different opinions? Do you have any books that you think that I would like to read? And please tell me that you are intending on reading Dear Centran. Yes, that is how you say it. Everybody's saying this book wrong. It's not Dear Centurin. Centran. Don't pronounce the U. Just leave it out. You leave it out. Dear Centran. Yes, like I said, that's gonna do it for this video. I love Akweke Emezi. Buy all of their books. Here's my Instagram. Other social media links will be in the description box below. I love you. Love yourselves. I'll see you in my next one.